Hey, hello, Darlene. And let me promote her. Oh, you already did. Thank you so much.
Hi,
Hey,
Vanelli.
welcome. Welcome back. Now, Darlene is a very talented educator, and she's been dedicating, um, she's taking a little break from the photography side and dedicating a lot of her energy into helping other people through their education. So, thank you so much for doing that. So, what do you have for us today?
Do you want me to start sharing my screen? So I'm not actually in Venice. It's just my background. I wish I was actually, but I've got, actually this one is really appropriate because, just give me a second to switch out of my Zoom here. So I'm in Luminar here, and this one is actually really appropriate because I took this image in
Oh,
Japan 2 years ago and came up as a Facebook memory today. So I thought, well, that's perfect, right? I'll just share this one. This one I wanted to show mostly as an inspiration. And I heard Scott was talking about, looking through the templates just to get ideas and stuff. And that's exactly what happened on this one. Because let me show you the before here. I'm assuming you can see my screen, right?
yes. Yep.
All right. So look at this before image. This was an anime festival in Osaka, and this character's costume was amazing. And I wanted to process it in a way that would really give it justice and kind of add to that feeling of, the fantasy of the anime, right? And I was flipping through some of the new templates that were in Luminar AI, and this one with the bokeh came up, and it's actually inspired me to make some of my own overlays that look like this. So I started with that, and then I applied like a mood or a LUT to give it this final look. So just to kind of continue what Scott was saying about using the templates for inspiration. So I had an idea in my head as to the look that I wanted, but just by simply going through some of the templates that were suggested for me, it even suggested experimental, right? Pretty smart that it knew, I think you have something unusual here, right? So I've got a couple more that I wanted to, some tricks that I wanted to show people because I'm a portrait photographer mostly, and I love photographing people. Let me get my zoom out of the road here. Yeah, the little things get in the road. All right, here we go. Okay, zoom, go away. There we go. Okay, so we're in edit, and this is one of the tricks that I use on a lot of my portraits. The face light, oops, the face light I use a lot, and Scott mentioned that one just to brighten up the part of the face that should be having light on it. This was an available light situation in a small village in India, and I didn't have any flash or anything with me because we weren't preparing to go to this village. We just happened upon it, and the people were really lovely, so we photographed them. But what I wanted to show was using the face light, to add a little bit of light into her face. And she's got a nice direction of light, but her eyes are really dark. So the iris AI is something that I use a lot. And you'll see that even though the visibility is cranked up, it's still not brightening her eyes a whole great deal. So I have a little trick here. So I know that her eyes are brown. So I'm just going to go ahead and change the color of the iris to brown. And voila, look what happened. So I'll just zoom in here. You can see that it changed her eyes to brown. And now when I use the visibility slider, it's really picking up that color, right? So I'm not going to go all the way because as Scott talked about, it's really easy to make sort of demonic looking people, right? But I love the enhancer, and I love this new iris flare slider because it gives sort of that little highlight at the bottom of the iris down here, as if I had a reflector, coming from the bottom. So I'll just do a quick before and after on that. So you could see, let me just turn off the face AI. You could see how dark her face was and how dark her eyes are without that, the catch lights in her eyes. And now just using that iris change color trick. So I didn't actually change the color of her eyes. I chose the same color she already has. But that's my little trick.
One second. That's Maurice. One moment. Yeah, well, I'm seeing your screen great. Everyone else, please let me know. Yeah,
You're
your
seeing
screen's
it
coming
okay?
out really. Yep, it's coming out good.
All right. So let me know if they like that trick. Tell me in the chat if you guys are watching, if you like that little trick. I want to show you another one with the portrait AI tools that I use on a lot of group portraits, again with the face light slider. So be careful of changing the eye color when you have multiple people, because obviously if I change the iris color to blue, for example, we're all going to end up with blue eyes, right? So I would keep that to original if I have a group portrait. But the trick that I want to show you with face light on groups is, even though we all have really nice light on our faces here, this is, you know, done in a studio. We've got some nice studio lighting and nice catch lights and everything. The face light, this is another little trick that I sort of discovered or devised myself, is if you overlight the faces a little bit, what you can actually do then is go back to the light panel and dial your exposure down a little bit. And what it kind of does is creates a custom vignette to darken everything except the faces, right? So if I do a quick before and after, now I've done some other color corrections and things on here, you can see that I'm slimming our faces a little bit, brighten the eyes, and then that face light, I've probably gone a little bit too far. I tend to go overboard when I'm demonstrating, just so that you can see what it's doing. But that face light slider is allowing me to do basically darken everything except our faces. The only other way to do that would be to use dodge and burn, or to do like a really custom vignette, but then you're still going to get a circle without darkening the bits in here in between us, right? So that's a nice little trick that I sort of discovered. And you guys are welcome.
Really good. Yeah, I like that. I like that because again, where you're adding light, you're taking away, you're adding light and then subtracting light behind it, and that's what's going to make things just pop and jump out. So,
exactly.
Yep, that's a neat little trick.
Yeah, exactly. And then I might use, you know, if I find that if you cut your shadows and your highlights too much, you'll end up with something that's really flat. So I might bump up the smart contrast. So I'm not making sure that the faces don't get flattened, because I find that when I dodge or lighten the face overly much, you might get a lack of contrast there, and then the faces don't look like they fit in the picture. So I'll pump up that smart contrast, or I'll even actually go down and use the dehaze slider, even though this is not a landscape picture, and that will add the contrast as well. If I go to extremes, you can see what it's doing. Right, so that's another trick that I often recommend when I'm teaching, is take the slider to extreme just to see what it does. Go all the way one way and then go all the way the other way, and decide if that's something you want to add to your image. And of course, you also have a mask. So if I wanted to just apply this to the faces, I could just mask it in, paint it in real quick, just like so. And then just have that adding the contrast just onto the faces, right? It also allows me to copy the mask, which I was very excited about in this update. Okay, so this little 3 dots right here, I can copy the mask. And then when I close this tool, let's say I want to add, let's say I want to add some sharpening to the face. Okay, so I'm going to add a little bit of sharpening, and I'm going to take it to extreme again, just so that you can all see what's happening. But I want to mask it just to the faces, right? So I can open the mask, go to the 3 dots, paste, right? And now it's just applying to the faces. The other thing that does really well is I know that Bokeh AI is coming soon and everybody's excited about it. But a workaround that I've found is to use Structure AI and go to the negative. So again, I'm going to pull it to extreme just to show you guys what it's doing. It's obviously blurring things because I'm going minus structure, but I can use that same mask that I just used a minute ago, paste it again. Okay, so now it's going to blur just the faces, which is the opposite of what I want. And then I'm just going to invert it. Okay, so back to the 3 dots, invert. So now I've basically blurred everything except our faces. And I could go ahead and adjust that mask. For example, if I want to make sure that I have our bodies also sharp, and I would do a much better job of painting than this. I'm doing a really sort of quick and dirty just demonstration here, right? But then it gives me a way of blurring the background without having that Bokeh AI yet, right? So it's kind of a little
yeah. The neat thing about Structure AI is it's human aware, so it won't over sharpen the faces. It won't touch them. But I do notice that when you go to the opposite, sometimes it'll catch the hair sometimes it'll catch parts of it. Um, so it's interesting. Like I said, I notice the sharpening. It doesn't mess with it. It's phenomenal. But like what you just did there to give more of a soft glow to the background, it
Exactly.
sometimes does that.
Exactly. And just some keyboard shortcuts that I'm using for everybody's benefit is I'm using the / when I've got the mask open to actually show the mask all the time. So that's that /. And then I was using my square bracket keys to make the brush smaller and larger like that. So like I said, I would paint a little more critically if I was doing a final job of this. I'm just doing a really, quick and dirty sort of thing. I would probably zoom in to 100% as well and do a much better job of masking that. But that's something that I've told, my students and my followers how to do the background and blur it. If you don't have, like I said, the bokeh AI that's coming, and I'm very excited about, as was everybody else.
Now, okay. So I was mentioning this earlier. I made a comment about speed and efficiency in one of the forums, and ironically, a person came back and said, you guys keep talking about all the speed, but what about us people who take just as much pleasure in editing as we do taking the photo?
Mm,
I'm like, that's a great. I mean, it made me rethink. So there are times when I joked with people about the template. One click, it looks great, and then people feel guilty, like, oh shoot, I got to do something because that was too easy.
right.
So they have template guilt. So in a case like that, there are people who like to sit and explore, and there's nothing wrong with that. And the neat
Absolutely.
about Luminar AI, especially update 2, is that anything we do with the local masking and the brush sizes now are saved into one template. Whereas remember before, if you had different layers, each layer saved its own look, and you couldn't
Yes.
apply them all at the same time. So
Yep.
here we can apply it, which works out phenomenal.
Right. Because if I had, for example, 3 shots of this the same with just different expressions, I can also copy and paste it. So I can right click and choose adjustments, copy, and then paste that onto a similar image, or I could select them all. I usually have my histogram showing and not my thumbnails, but you could show your film strip and select the whole thing and have it apply to all of them as
Exactly.
well and sync it. So I really like
Oh,
that
good
feature.
speed tip. Good speed edit tip. Now, by the way, did you notice what they did with the histogram is now when you switch out, like here, you
Yes,
see how it disappears?
it stays there. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that was one thing that annoyed me was it kept going away and I had to keep putting it back on and now it stays. So yes, I did notice that. Thanks for pointing that out. I put a folder of images on here for today. So I want to just show people how quickly they add as well. So these are DNGs because I had them on another drive and I just converted them from my Fuji RAF files, which are fully supported as well. And I wanted to show another thing I did with templates because I had a photo. Let me just switch over here to Lightroom for a second. So I had this photo and my workflow, my own personal workflow is I work with Lightroom, then I open the image into Photoshop as a smart object, and I do that by right clicking, edit in smart object, right down here, okay? Then I open it in Photoshop as a smart object, then I invoke the Luminar plugin, because then what I can do is I could actually open this image as the PSD and still have Luminar there. So if I wanted to
Exactly.
tweak any of the Luminar edits, I can. But what I did with this one was I created a template that I saved, and I called it Turkish Faded Sepia Look because that was a Turkish man. And I wanted to see what it's going to look like if I apply it on some of these other images that I've got in my collection here. So I'm going to try it on this one. This is the family I photographed in Nicaragua. So it'll take a minute for it to catch up with me.
And that's the other thing. Where Luminar, when it illuminates Skylum blue, means it's thinking.
Yep.
And when it stops, boom, it's ready.
Yes, I noticed that as well. It kind of has like a wave over the name. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I like the look of that because it looks kind of that older, sort of, well, like I said, faded sepia look, right? So I had a few images that I thought would work well with this type of look, and I could do copy and paste. Well, let's try that. So let's do copy adjustments. And you can do the keyboard shortcut, Command or Control C as well. And then let's paste it onto this one. Now I've got a lot of images from different places, and I can't tell you more about it yet because I don't think Doug will allow me, but I'm working on something special for Skylum. So coming soon. That's all I can say. Oops. Uh-oh. I lost Luminar. Let me relaunch that. I got lots of resources going on here. I should
Yeah,
close some of
that's
my.
one thing. I wish we had a little pop-up tool that says you're running low on system resources. The knock on wood, we've done close to almost what 400, 300 to 400 episodes of Coffee Break, and in that time from session 1 to session 2, we've had maybe 2 crashes, and the time it crashed is me trying to pull something off of the web, in a Dropbox folder. But typically, when it shuts down like this, it means your system resources are being pushed.
Yeah, absolutely. And just for everybody's benefit, I mean, Zoom takes a lot of resources by itself. So, and I had YouTube open, which I've now closed. So I applied this template onto this one of the lady. Okay, once she comes up, she's loading here. This was a red Hmong lady from Vietnam. I'll go back to Lightroom for a second here. So I used that template on a few of these images as well. I used it on this one, and then I actually dialed it back, which is what Rich was showing Scott earlier about. You can dial it down to like 80% or whatever. So I applied it here, and then I dialed it down, right? I did a major sky replacement on this image. So I kind of used this one as my tester when the reflections came out, and I went a little crazy with effects and stuff, but I was quite happy with it. This was the original, and you can see that this one is a PSD file. Okay, so I'll put my information on the screen there. So you can see it was a PSD file. So I did all my edits in Photoshop into Luminar as a plugin. I changed the sky, I added the birds, and the relight and the relight human worked really well on this one to match his color with the new sky. I tried a few different skies, and it always matched him as color.
Oh, sweet.
Okay, so now we've got this lady loaded up, and you can see a couple of things happen. Like she's got her eye color is a little bit wonky, so I'll probably go back and lower that a little bit, right? So I changed her to hazel eyes. Maybe I'll change that back to original, or take it down a little bit if it's too. You want to, like Scott said, you don't want to end up with something that looks fake. I try and avoid things like going like this, like two extremes, right? So I'll whiten her teeth, but not too extreme, right? You don't want devil people. She's a little bit dark overall, so I'm going to go back up to the light panel, and yes, my histogram is still there, so we've proven you correct on that one. I just reset the whites and give her a little bit of a bump. So I'm watching the histogram so that it's coming more over to the edge, and I use my white slider to stretch out the graph a little bit, and you'll see what's happening there. And then probably what I would do is just go in and do a vignette on darken that left panel here where the light is coming from, or do a dodge and burn, maybe even give her a little bit more shadows. But I think overall that quick brightening up. So all I did there was added the template, adjusted the facial editing, and adjusted the lighting. And we've gone from before to after. And the original was a little bit dark as well. So that's why I needed to brighten it.
That's good. Hey, that's great. We have time for one more. If you have one more.
Let's see. I did a sky replacement on this one actually, and it worked really well. So again, like I said, I'm a portrait photographer mainly, and I photograph people, but I do often have my sky in the picture, right? So this one was a really sort of overcast day, and the sky was not looking so great. And I love the new ability to see different skies, right? So I want to look for a sky that's going to match similar. I've got some of my own skies in there at the bottom here, so I'm going to scroll down because I know that one of them worked pretty well. There was one that looks cloudy. We could even try lightning. That might be fun. Let's try the lightning, see what happens. So they're fishing, and they're bringing their fish in. at the end of the day, and it was quite cloudy. The sun is behind the clouds here, there. Yikes, that's pretty dramatic, eh?
Yeah.
But you can
And
see that it
the
matched
secret thing
the
with
image.
skies is make sure the sky looks like it would have been.
Yeah, but
Exactly.
that's interesting there because you put a really dark sky in, so it did what it was supposed to, which is it
Match.
darkened the scene.
Yeah, exactly. So this one, I'm gonna use the simulating. I might flip this one. So I think the light, move it up a little, maybe. Let's see where the bottom of the sky is. And I like the new ability to move it side to side. That's brilliant as well. So I can see if I can get a bit more of those clouds in there. So that one kind of looks like it matches. And let's do a little bit of a relight. This image is dark to begin with, so I would do the same thing and brighten it up a little bit. Right. I'm going pretty quick because I know where my sliders are, and that's partly just experience. When you use a program more and more, you'll get used to, where you look for the things that you need to do what you want to do. Right. I know that I want to adjust the brightness. That's going to be in the light panel. Right. Enhance AI is going to enhance the sky a bit more. And actually, I should have started there because that one is going to crunch up my shadows and do a really nice job. So I think that sky is a little bit more interesting than the original one, which was just blown out. I'll probably play with it a little bit more. I also added a sun rays in the version that I did. I'll just hop over to Lightroom again because I had that one.
I'm sorry. I love that shot. I looked away for a moment to read. I looked back, and here's a guy holding two skulls.
Oh yeah. Yeah, he's that's an interesting one. But see, there's the final version. So I started with that, and the relight really worked well, and you pick up the
And look what
colors
it's doing to the
in
water.
Yeah.
Yep, right by their feet.
The splashing. Yeah. So they were coming in, and I was literally at the edge of the water as they were bringing their fish in. You want to see the guy with the skulls again? Yeah, we got up early morning that day. So we've got we had a softbox off camera to the left here. He's sitting on the boat. It's really early. The sun is actually behind him, right? So I wanted to make sure whenever you do a sky replacement, like you said, Vanelli, make sure it makes sense, or it said that the light is coming from sort of camera left behind him here. So we put the light on him from the same side. So if you put your sky in and the light comes from the opposite direction, it's not going to make sense visually. So you want to make sure that the light is all coming from the same direction and that it matches. Because this sky was, really kind of hazy. It's Varanasi, India, and they're always burning things because they do a lot of cremations and things of bodies, and there's always smoke and haze in the sky there. So I didn't want a sky that was bright blue because I barely saw the bright blue sky there when I was there. So you want something that's going to match, and I used that atmosphere slider to basically soften it and give it that hazy look. And the birds were added because these are all fishing boats as well. And there was a lot of birds around, just not at that particular moment. So he's an Agori holy man. And the story is that they eat human remains. So,
Ooh.
Yeah.
Now it's not as funny.
Not as funny.
No, I want you to meet my friend. No. If I see this guy with a bib on smiling at me, I'm going to be a little nervous.
Yeah, running. Well, I mean, I was on a boat with them, and he had two skulls, and they definitely were human skulls. Now, they don't say that I have to look more into the culture, and I don't want to speak incorrectly, but from my understanding, they eat human remains. They don't kill people and then eat them, right? So they're already dead, which is kind of gross, but they burn them and eat the ashes, and they have the ashes on their face and things like that. But he was a man that our fixer that we worked with in Varanasi hired as our model, and we had a couple of other holy men as well, some sadhus. Yeah, it was really interesting. I brought this one up because this is one I just want to leave on. Is I did a sky replacement on this one. This was in Venice as well. And when I did the sky replacement, I actually tested this one in Photoshop and in Luminar. And this little square down here, can you see this? There's kind of a little cutout. Photoshop did not pick that up. No matter what I did, and I moved the sky down, it did not recognize that was sky, and Luminar did. So I was very happy.
And think back in the old days, replacing a sky like that, let alone reflections, on the ground, and then the new people, reflection. It's amazing. I mean, it's just It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it's way less work for sure. And again, it's not something that I do a lot because I'm a portrait photographer. But I mean, here's 3 examples, of where I did a sky replacement. So even though these are people pictures, I'm still doing a sky replacement.
Awesome job. Hey, Darlene, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're
And
welcome. Thanks for
where
having
can
me.
they find, where can our viewers find more about you?
They can find me on digitalphotomentor.com, and I'm DP Mentor on Twitter and on Instagram. And I do have a gallery on my website as well. If you want to see more of these images, I've got a gallery called Faces of the World, and lots more of these interesting people from different places.
That sounds great. Well, hey, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm sure I'll see you again soon.
Take care. Thanks so much.
Bye bye.
So before we get to our next guest, and thank you again, Darlene, so much for coming, I just wanted to share a couple of resources, so we'll make this nice and simple. By the way, we did mention that you could use that code Deep Dive, all one word in caps, and that's going to allow you to take $10 off just about every item in your shopping cart. Someone said, did it work on Luminar X? It did. Did it work on templates? It did. Did it work on skies? So that's a really good coupon code because it's $10 off each item in your cart. So take advantage of that. I hope that that helps. I wanted to show one thing, and Vanelli, if you can get our next guest queued up, I'm just going to walk people through a couple things that I saw questions on. So first up, in Luminar, when you're working with an image, if you've got Adobe DNG Creator installed or you have Photoshop or Lightroom installed, we read those same profiles. Otherwise, you could download and install the free DNG Creator tool from Adobe, and that installs a bunch of DCP profiles. That stands for Digital Negative. DNG is home, Digital Negative File. I'm forgetting what the G is, but that's okay. And a DCP file is a DNG Creative Profile or DNG Camera Profile. So that's what these profiles are. So if you install that free tool, that DNG Creator tool, it'll put a bunch of profiles in here. And you could go ahead and access those. And if not, you could load and manually browse. But when it says things like camera standard or camera faithful or portrait, what it's doing here is it's reading in the actual preset that this Canon camera was using. So it lets you access, in this case from the CR2 file, the manufacturer suggested ones here that Canon would have given you as a starting point. So that's a nice little tip so that you could very quickly get those to the right point, which works out really, really well. And you could take advantage of that. You also may have seen in the chat pod, and we'll add a link in again, that we've given you some textures. So you just click the load texture button and then you can navigate. And so we've shared the paper texture kit and we shared, we're going to share Filmic in a moment, but I also shared another item here that was pretty cool. And it should have been this one here called Torn Edges. So these are some ones I mentioned that we made, my daughter and I, the other day. And we did a bunch of torn up paper. You can drop those in. It's going to place it on. Click the Place Texture button. And now you could easily refine that and dial that in to the look that you want. Just grab those edges and pull. And that makes it really simple. Then you can adjust the opacity of the tool, how you like it, which works out very nicely. And a couple of you are asking, how do I use all those LUTs you've been giving us? Just go back here and go down to the Mood tool, and you could click and say, Load Custom Lut. And we gave you all of those cool analog LUTs. There's a bunch of fun retro looks here, and that's an easy way, and you see we pulled that off. By the way, if you've applied a texture, here's how cool it is. You could swap it out. Just go back to the texture and say load texture. You can navigate, and now I want to see the white version of that. So I'll say, oh, let's swap it for this one. And you're going to see that it adjusts and lets me do that swap out very easily. So I can get that torn paper feeling. And now when we're all set, if we wanted to apply that to other images, we could do it. Watch. We'll just say that we want to copy that, Command C, come up here and Command V. And it's going to paste. Control C, Control V on a Windows machine, or right-click synchronize. And notice, unlike layers, the template is actually smart enough, and so it adjusts to the different aspect ratio. So as you go to different images here, it's able to handle that and lets you mix all those things together, which is pretty cool. V, you're seeing my screen okay, right? Okay.
I'm sorry. Yes, I am. Yeah, I'm
Okay,
just.
no problem.
I have Gary, and I'm just trying to promote him panelist.
No problem. Just check with Doug. He should be able to help you with that. I'll keep going until you got Gary loaded and ready. All right. So let me show you one other thing. And that was a question about, well, how do I do this if I'm working in Photoshop? So if you've opened up a raw file in Photoshop here and you click open, you get the ability to open as a smart object. So when you open something into Camera Raw, at the very bottom, there's a little piece of text that's kind of hidden. So you click here, and you could choose to open in Photoshop as a smart object. In Lightroom, you can do the same thing. File, open in Photoshop as smart object. That embeds the raw file into the image itself. So when you open that object in Photoshop, it embeds the raw file right into the layer. Luminar can be used as a smart object plugin. So if I run Luminar AI there, it's going to actually run on this layer non-destructively. And the cool thing about smart objects is later, after you close the Photoshop file, you could reopen it and all your Luminar settings are going to be totally live. So you could actually go in and make adjustments after the fact. It'll come up with all the sliders intact, which is cool. So let's just go ahead and we'll take that to sunset or nice clean light. I like that one. And I'm gonna just drop in another change. I feel like that sky's nice, but not quite the mood I wanted. But I'm gonna use the erase tool here first and just content aware erase our person. I just want a nice clean empty landscape. There we go. And that's nice about that is it actually puts it into the underhood. So as we make other adjustments, it's gonna adjust. So it doesn't make a new layer anymore. It doesn't stick it on the top. But let's drop in a new sky. And we'll just browse here. And I want something a little bit later. Sunset clouds. And I'll go with something nice and warm. And that layers it in. You see it drops it. You can move that around if needed. You could adjust the mask refinement. But it did a nice job there. It recognized that that was a mountain there and not a hole. And we'll just fill that in with a little bit of scenery lighting. Have it pick up the color from the scene. There we go. Now it's nice and unified. And then with our reflection there, we can control it casting the color into that original lake there so it picks up that color. Click apply and it's handed back to Photoshop. And in the future, if you ever need to, all you have to do is double click on the filter in the layers panel. So you could just double click that filter and it will actually reopen up Luminar with everything being live for editing. All right, I hope that answers a couple of the questions. Also, some of you are asking, why can't I use the composition AI tool inside of Photoshop? That's because Photoshop doesn't let you change the size of the canvas. So it has to stay at its original size and you're not able to make that change. But there it is, you see it applies the filter and it will add it right below. And in the future, you just double click on that and you're able to edit.